After a campus party in 2002, college junior Lacey Harmon vanished during her walk back to the dorm. No one ever saw her again. Now, 2 decades later, her former roommate stumbles upon Lacey's old diary, hidden behind insulation during a home renovation. What it contains reignites a dormant mystery and suggests the truth was far closer than anyone believed. The string lights wrapped around the front columns of the Theta Chi sorority house flickered gently in the warm breeze of that April night in 2002. Music thumped from inside, muffled bass, and drunken laughter pouring out each time the door cracked open. Lacey Harmon stood just outside the porch railing, her phone clutched loosely in her right hand, her bag slung over one shoulder. She was 21, a junior at Ridgewater College in upstate New York, majoring in psychology. And she had just told her roommate Megan via text, heading back now. Too loud here. It was the last message anyone ever received from her. Lacey had never been one for big parties, but it was senior send-off season, and her friend Alyssa had begged her to show up for just an hour. She'd come alone. Megan was working a late shift at the library and had planned to leave before midnight. Several witnesses later recalled seeing her leave the house alone around 11:30 p.m. She turned east, heading up Grove Street away from the party. From there, the trail vanished. No cameras caught her after that point. No one remembered hearing anything. No sign of a struggle, no torn clothes or dropped belongings. Her bag, phone, and ID were never recovered. The following morning, Megan noticed Lacey's bed still made. That wasn't like her. Maybe she stayed over with someone, one friend had said. But Megan knew better. Lacey always texted if she made a last-minute plan change. She had anxiety about being unpredictable. She never went quiet. By noon, Megan was pacing. By evening, she was at the campus police office filing a missing persons report. Within 24 hours, the Ridgewater Police Department had become involved. Flyers went up. Candlelight vigils were organized. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, hope dimmed. The media picked up the story briefly. College co-ed vanishes without a trace. The coverage was heavy for 2 weeks, then evaporated like fog in summer. Tips poured in, most meaningless. A girl matching Lacey's description was seen in Boston, another in Syracuse. None were her. Her parents, Robert and Marlene Harmon, drove up from Pennsylvania and remained in town for nearly a year, renting an apartment nearby and chasing every lead. By the end of that year, Robert had suffered a mild stroke. Marlene stopped answering phone calls. Megan visited when she could, but what comfort could she offer? There was a police theory that Lacey had left of her own will. Maybe a breakdown, a sudden decision to disappear. Megan refused to accept that. Lacey had a dream to open a trauma counseling practice. She had job applications pending and graduation plans already inked out on their shared calendar. She was taken, Megan told anyone who asked. She didn't walk away. The most chilling detail, Lacey's walk from the Theta Chi house to their dorm was only 9 minutes. Less than 4 blocks. Well lit. It was a path she'd taken dozens of times. And that night, it had swallowed her whole. After 3 years with no leads, the case was classified as cold, but open. A few anniversaries came and went. Then people stopped marking them. Megan graduated. She moved away. But she never truly let go. In quiet ways, she kept Lacey's memory alive, lighting candles, saving newspaper clippings, visiting that same stretch of Grove Street every spring. And yet nothing ever pointed her toward the truth. Until 2 decades later, when Lacey's voice came back in ink. Megan Carson stood in the center of her father's dusty old hallway drywall, dust clinging to her jeans, a flat pry bar dangling from her gloved hand. The house smelled of cedar and mildew. A late spring rain pattered softly against the windows, but all Megan could hear was the thrum of her own heart. The remodeling had started 2 weeks earlier. After her father passed away that winter, The house on Briar Street, unused for almost a decade, was left to her. She didn't want to sell it, not yet. Something about it held her in place. Memories of childhood, her dad's laugh, and now something more. The moment happened by accident. She'd been clearing out insulation from a section of wall near the old utility closet, planning to reroute some aging wires, when her flashlight beam caught a warped piece of paneling. Behind it, a hollowed space between studs. Stuffed into the cavity, wrapped in a worn sweatshirt, was a small, spiral-bound notebook. Megan sat on the floor and opened it. Her breath caught in her throat. Written in a looping hand she hadn't seen in 20 years. "If something happens to me, please know this wasn't an accident." The diary was Lacey's. Megan felt lightheaded. She sat in stunned silence for minutes before she flipped the page. Lacey's handwriting was unmistakable, neat, slanted slightly to the right, with tiny hearts over lowercase is. Megan ran her fingers across the first few pages, disbelief gnawing at her spine. Why was this here? She hadn't seen it during college. It had never come up in Lacey's things. After Lacey disappeared, police had inventoried her side of the dorm room. Her clothes, her laptop, her planner. But never a diary. And now here it was, hidden in her childhood home. Shaking, Megan flipped to the back, where a folded piece of paper was tucked into the final page. A single date was written on it in bold black ink, April 12, 2002, the night Lacey vanished. Megan forced herself to breathe. She needed to call someone. The police. Maybe a private investigator. But first she had to read. Lacey's last entries were frantic, almost rushed. "Something feels wrong with Craig lately. He's sweet one moment, controlling the next. I don't like the way he looks at my phone, or how he talks about Megan. I've been getting weird texts from an unknown number. They always say the same thing, 'You know too much.' I think Craig knows about what happened in October. If he finds the diary, I'm scared." Megan blinked, rereading each line. Craig, that was Lacey's boyfriend. Craig Durnell. She remembered him vividly, a tall, charming senior with a theater major's confidence and a politician's smile. Everyone loved him. The faculty adored him. But Lacey had mentioned little concerns, even back then. Megan remembered an argument in the stairwell outside their dorm, Lacey whispering, "I don't want to lie for you anymore." Megan had brushed it off at the time. College drama, relationships were hard. But now, her stomach twisted. She checked the timestamp on the last page. April 12, 2002, 8:12 p.m. Lacey had written it hours before attending that party. In the margin, a single sentence had been underlined twice. "If I don't come back, start with Craig." Megan closed the diary. The room felt colder. How had this diary ended up in her father's wall? The house had been empty since before 2015. She herself hadn't lived in Ridgewater since 2006. And yet here it was, hidden like a message in a bottle. Like a time capsule waiting to detonate. She picked up her phone and dialed the Ridgewater PD. It rang twice before someone picked up. "Detective Linwood," a man's voice answered. "My name is Megan Carson," she said, her voice shaking. "I was Lacey Harmon's roommate. I think I just found her diary." There was a pause. "Then I'm listening." Detective Elijah Linwood stared at the photos Megan had taken of the diary. The laminated ID badge taped to the inside cover, the slanted writing, the nervous tone etched between the lines, all of it was too real to be fabricated. He'd only been a rookie in 2002, barely 2 months into the Ridgewater PD when the Harmon case dominated the department. Now, 20 years later, he was the one holding the pieces. Across the table, Megan sat, rigid fingers clenched in her lap. They were in a small room just off the station's records wing, the same building where she had filed the original missing persons report 2 decades ago. "We verified the handwriting with some of the yearbooks and old reports," Linwood said finally. "It's hers." Megan nodded, her face pale. "We'd like to know how it ended up in your father's house." "So would I," she said. He didn't know Lacey. He only visited me on campus twice, and we weren't close for most of those years. I moved out when I was 22. Linwood jotted something down, then asked, "Was anyone staying there in 2002 besides your father?" "No," she said. "It was always just him. And it sat empty for long stretches, especially when he traveled." He leaned forward. "Could someone have planted the diary there?" Megan looked up sharply. "You think someone wanted it found now? I think someone didn't want it found then." He opened the manila folder that had lain closed between them. "We've reopened the case as a homicide investigation. Based on the entries and what you brought to light, it's clear she feared for her safety. And this Craig Durnell, he was never questioned as a suspect. Because everyone loved him," Megan said bitterly, "and because she was too careful." She never outright accused him, just hinted. "Still," Linwood said, "there were gaps." Craig claimed he left the party at midnight and walked home, alone. No one confirmed that, but he had a good reputation. No priors, no signs of aggression. But if he was controlling, Megan said he would have known how to hide it. "We'll talk to him again." As the interview wound down, Megan paused at the door. "Detective?" "Yes. Do you think she hid the diary herself? Or do you think someone else put it there?" Linwood didn't answer immediately. "Then depends. Let's find out who had access to that house." Craig Durnell lived just 45 minutes outside Ridgewater now in a modest but clean condo near the Hudson River. His LinkedIn profile listed him as a consultant for a regional political campaign group. His photo was unchanged, sharp suit, sharper smile. Megan hadn't seen him in nearly 2 decades, but the chill down her spine returned instantly as Linwood showed her the picture. "I never trusted him," she said, "even when they were dating, but I didn't have proof. You might now." 2 days later, Linwood visited Craig at his office. He wore his badge openly with the kind of authority Craig had once practiced pretending. "You're reopening that." Craig blinked, leaning back in his chair. "I thought the Harmon case was closed." "It was never closed," Linwood replied. "Just cold." But new evidence surfaced. Craig's posture shifted slightly. "What kind of evidence?" "A diary," Linwood said. "Lacey's, with some very pointed entries about you." Craig laughed. It was a brittle sound. "You think I killed her? I think I'd like to know where you were between 11:30 p.m. and 1:10 a.m. that night." Craig held his smile, but his eyes flinched. "I told the police back then I went straight home. Ask my RA." "Your RA moved to Idaho in 2006, Linwood said. "But we will. And we'll also review your dorm's visitor logs. And your cell records." "You had a phone back then." Craig's face tightened. "This is ridiculous." "Maybe." Linwood stood. "But sometimes diaries don't lie. People do." That night, Megan received a call from Detective Linwood. "We found something else," he said. "What?" "A maintenance log," he replied. "From the Ridgewater Power Department. Shows that during the early hours of April 13th, there was a blackout in the Grove Street district. Lasted 23 minutes. Megan's heart dropped. That would have been exactly when Lacey was walking home. "Exactly. And cameras would have gone dark," she whispered. "Yes. Which might explain why no footage of her route ever surfaced." "What does that mean?" "It means someone might have planned it that way." The pieces began shifting in Megan's mind, like glass panes falling into place. A sudden blackout the night Lacey vanished, planned or coincidental, it meant someone could have used that moment as cover. Someone who knew the campus power grid well. Someone who needed a dark window just 20 minutes long. Megan sat in her father's old study, the diary resting beside her like a sleeping animal. Since finding it, she hadn't let it leave her sight. She had read it 3 more times this last time, not for answers but tone searching the spaces between words. The silence in the margins. The fear threaded through cheerful entries. It was there, if you knew how to see it. Lacey had loved puzzles, crosswords, logic grids. Megan realized now the diary was one of them, a confession written sideways. Her phone buzzed. A text from Detective Linwood. "Need you to come in. There's something we need you to ID." 20 minutes later, Megan was at the Ridgewater PD. On the table was a cardboard evidence box, long sealed and just now reopened. It was logged in 2004 as part of a campus storage cleanup, Linwood explained. Filed under unclaimed belongings. It ended up in a warehouse downtown. We'd never cross-referenced it with Lacey's missing property. He opened the box carefully. Inside, Megan saw a white cardigan folded clean but aged, and beneath it, a single sandal. Lacey's. Megan had helped her pick them out that spring, beige with thin ankle straps and silver buckles. "That's hers," Megan whispered. "There's more." At the bottom was a crumpled cocktail napkin. From the Catbird Lounge, a campus bar. Scribbled on it, "Meet me behind the Fine Arts Building. Midnight. Don't bring Megan." No name, just a time and warning. Megan looked at Linwood. She never mentioned this in the diary. She may not have seen it until later, Linwood said. Or she was scared to mention it directly. Why hide it? Linwood paused. If she didn't trust anyone, maybe she left clues only someone close to her could piece together. Megan nodded slowly. And the Fine Arts Building is right next to the maintenance alley. The circuit access. They both stared at the napkin. The investigation widened. Records from the Ridgewater Maintenance Department were pulled. Employee logs. Badge records. Megan's father had worked in municipal engineering, but never on campus directly. Then Linwood found something, a requisition request, from April 10, 2002, 2 days before Lacey's disappearance. It was signed by Craig Durnell. He had volunteered as part of the Student Council Facilities team. The request access to the breaker panel in the Grove Street zone for event lighting tests. Craig had a reason to know about the power grid, and perhaps how to exploit it. Still, it wasn't proof. Then Megan had a memory. Small, almost insignificant. Back in 2005, her father's house had been broken into. Nothing was taken, but the basement had been disturbed. The breaker box left ajar. They had assumed it was kids. What if that break-in wasn't random, she asked Linwood. What if someone was checking to see if the diary was still there? The possibility was chilling. Linwood nodded slowly. That would mean whoever took her was still scared. Back at the house, Megan began reviewing old photos. She flipped through her college photo albums, scrutinizing images from those final days before Lacey disappeared. Then she saw it, a picture from the Theta Chi party. Lacey, Craig, and herself laughing near the staircase. Lacey was holding a drink, but her eyes weren't laughing. They were watching something. No, someone outside the frame. Megan turned the photo over. A faded pen note. Last night we were all together. Tears welled in Megan's eyes. That photo was taken hours before her friend vanished. She scanned the background again. The kitchen doorway. A shadowed figure, blurry, half obscured. Not Craig. Someone else. Someone older. Megan's breath caught. The bartender. There had been an older guy working that party, unusual since most parties were student-staffed. What if Craig wasn't alone? She texted Linwood a picture of the photo. His reply came quickly. Bring it in. That man, he's not in any official guest logs. The case wasn't just about a boyfriend anymore. It was expanding, and it had just gotten darker. Detective Linwood enlarged the photo Megan had found and pinned it beside a timeline chart in the case room. It wasn't much, a blurry figure in the kitchen doorway, half obscured by glare, but it was enough. Enough to make a call. Enough to dig deeper. They ran the image through campus archives, comparing it against event staff, alumni photos, maintenance rosters. And there, 6 folders deep in a 2002 catering vendor file, they found him. Howard Howie Raskin, a former part-time campus maintenance worker. He'd been contracted to assist with event logistics on several occasions. According to campus logs, he had been terminated after a noise complaint incident in 2003. Something vague swept under the rug. Raskin wasn't just a bartender. He'd worked directly in facilities and had keys to several buildings. And this, Linwood muttered, circling dates on a wallboard, puts him on campus the night Lacey disappeared. When they brought Raskin in for questioning, he didn't deny being at the party. He even admitted to remembering Lacey. She was quiet. Polite, he said, voice scratchy from years of smoking. Didn't seem like the party type. When asked if he'd spoken to her that night, his eyes narrowed. I poured her a drink, maybe. I don't know. It was 20 years ago. But his story started to unravel when shown the napkin Megan had found. Raskin's demeanor shifted. I've never seen that, he said. We didn't ask if you'd seen it, Linwood said. We asked if you wrote it. Raskin leaned back, cracking his knuckles. You've got nothing. Outside the interview room, Linwood spoke to Megan. He's lying, but we can't pin him without something more solid. Then Megan remembered something else. A conversation from months before Lacey vanished. They'd been talking about fear, how women on campus learned to carry their keys between their knuckles, how they avoided stairwells. Lacey had said, if anything ever happens to me, check the fine arts prop room. Seriously, I keep notes there. Back then, it had sounded like a joke. A nervous half-laugh. Now Megan wasn't so sure. The next morning, Megan and Linwood got access to the fine arts building. It was dusty and half-renovated, full of retired set pieces and forgotten scenery flats. The prop room was locked, but a custodian let them in. It smelled of old wood and paint thinner. Megan scanned the shelves. Costumes, stage swords, cardboard castles. Then her eyes locked on something strange, a wooden box tucked beneath a wardrobe rack, painted black to match the walls, barely visible. She pulled it out, inside a plastic envelope, labeled in red marker, Craig, April 10. Linwood opened it with gloves. Inside were 2 printed emails. One from Lacey to herself, drafted but never sent. The other a saved chat transcript with a username Darkroom62. They read in silence. Lacey had been exchanging messages with someone who knew about Craig's involvement in a possible incident, something vague involving covering up a mistake and a threat that it would all come out unless she stayed quiet. The emails implied blackmail, pressure, maybe something worse. She was trying to trap them, Megan whispered. Whoever was threatening her, she was documenting it. And she hid the evidence here, Linwood said, because she knew her dorm could be searched. It was a smart move, one that had almost worked. Then Linwood's phone rang. The lab had results from the cardigan and sandal found in the storage box. There's DNA on the cardigan, Linwood said after ending the call. 2 sets. One is Lacey's. Megan swallowed. And the other, Howard Raskin. Later that night, Megan returned to her father's house. She moved through the rooms differently now, as though something sacred had been unearthed. In a way, it had. Her home had kept a truth secret for 2 decades. She passed the wall where the diary had been hidden and stopped. There was something underneath the floorboard, a scuff she hadn't noticed before. She crouched and pressed her palm to the worn wood. A loose plank gave slightly. With effort, she lifted it. Taped beneath was a small cassette tape, labeled Lacey, Final. Her hands trembled as she called Linwood. The case wasn't cold anymore. Detective Linwood placed the cassette into an old tape deck, sourced from the evidence room's tech graveyard. The player whirred to life with a soft click, and then static filled the room. Megan sat beside him, knees pulled to her chest, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm spring air. And then Lacey's voice, faint, tired, but unmistakably hers. If you're listening to this, then something happened to me. Megan's breath caught. The room went still. I didn't want to believe it was real. I thought maybe I was imagining it. But Craig's not who I thought he was. And now I think I'm in danger. The recording was raw, no script, no plan. Just a girl speaking into the darkness. It started last fall. He asked me to lie for him. said he made a mistake. He didn't explain what at first. But then I overheard him talking to Howie, the guy from maintenance. They were fighting about a girl. I think she was hurt. Maybe worse. They said if anyone found out, they'd both be finished. Megan glanced at Linwood, her face pale. I kept the messages, the notes. I've hidden everything. I wrote it all down, some in my diary, some in the prop room. If anything happens to me, please, don't let them say I just left. I didn't leave. I wouldn't do that to Megan or my parents. Craig's been following me. I think he went through my things. He mentioned the party. He said it would be the perfect night to start over. He was smiling when he said it. Too wide. A pause. Shallow breathing. I don't know if I'll get another chance to record. If I don't come home tonight. He did it. Or Howie. Or both. Please believe me. The tape clicked softly. Then silence. Megan wiped tears from her cheeks. She knew she whispered. She knew exactly what was coming. Linwood reached for his phone. I'm getting warrants for both of them. Over the next 48 hours, arrests were made. Howard Raskin was taken in on obstruction and accessory charges. His DNA matched to Lacey's cardigan was the nail in the coffin. When confronted with the recording, his resolve cracked. He confessed to helping Craig deal with the problem, though he never used the word murder. She was going to ruin everything, he told detectives. Craig said it had to be done. Craig Durnell was arrested during a campaign retreat in upstate New York. He didn't resist. Just asked one question: did she tell anyone else? The truth had finally surfaced, but Lacey still hadn't. 1 week later, a groundskeeper found something behind the Ridgewater maintenance shed, buried beneath a collapsed drain pipe and years of overgrowth. Cadaver dogs confirmed the presence of remains. Dental records, personal jewelry, and DNA made the identification official: Lacey Harmon. She had been just yards from where she disappeared, hidden in a space only someone with campus access could have known about. News stations ran the story for days. Justice after 20 years. Ridgewater cold case solved. Photos of Lacey, smiling, young, full of hope, flashed across screens from coast to coast. But for Megan, it wasn't closure. Not really. It was grief all over again. At Lacey's memorial service held on the college lawn, Megan read aloud from the diary. She chose an entry from the spring of 2001. I want to be remembered for helping people. Not just for what happened to me. For how I listened. How I stayed. How I tried to do the right thing. The crowd listened in silence. Afterward, Megan stayed behind, letting the wind rustle through the trees. I'm sorry it took this long, she whispered. But we found you, and they'll never hurt anyone else again. As she turned to leave, a gust of wind carried a page from her printed speech across the grass. She bent to catch it, then smiled faintly. One of Lacey's signature hearts was drawn in the corner. 3 months later, Megan sat alone in the Ridgewater Library, surrounded by boxes of evidence reports and old campus files. The investigation had technically concluded. Charges were being processed. Craig Durnell's trial was set for early next year, and Howard Raskin had accepted a plea deal in exchange for full testimony. But Megan wasn't done. She was haunted by one line from Lacey's tape. They said if anyone found out, they'd both be finished. Both. That word echoed in Megan's mind. Craig and Howie were implicated, yes. But something didn't sit right. Lacey's death had been too clean, too well hidden, too calculated. And there was another name. Back in the diary, Lacey had mentioned a professor. Briefly. A Mr. Fallon. She'd called him too friendly. She'd written, Craig introduced me to Fallon at the dean's reception. I didn't like how he looked at me, or how they talked when they thought I wasn't listening. At the time, Megan had glossed over the reference. But now she pulled every faculty record she could find. Professor Jonathan Fallon, tenured psychology professor, retired in 2008, moved to Arizona, no complaints on record. But Megan's gut told her something was missing. She searched his name against campus news archives and found nothing. Then, on a whim, she looked into the missing person case Lacey mentioned from the diary, another girl, Renee Carson, a freshman who had reportedly dropped out mid-semester in 2001 after academic challenges. Renee's withdrawal form had been signed by Fallon. She dug deeper. Fallon had written a glowing recommendation for Craig Durnell in 2002 for a postgraduate internship. He'd called Craig principled, disciplined, and a natural leader. Megan felt the chill creep down her spine. She brought her findings to Linwood. At first he frowned. "Fallon, we never looked at him. We should have," Megan said. "I think Craig wasn't the mastermind. I think he had help." Linwood took the file and began flipping through it. "You really want to keep going?" "She was my best friend," Megan said. "And she tried to tell us. She tried to tell me." That night, Linwood pulled Lacey's original file. In the initial days after the disappearance, several anonymous calls had come into the tip line. One was a deep male voice who said, "You're looking in the wrong places. Look closer to the psychology department." The call had been logged, not traced. The recording was never analyzed. Linwood had it pulled and digitized. The lab matched the voice to a public lecture recording from 2005. It was Jonathan Fallon. The next day, Linwood and Megan paid Fallon a visit. His home was a stucco ranch house outside Sedona, with wind chimes and cacti lining the walkway. He answered the door in a sweater vest, white hair neatly combed. "Can I help you?" "We'd like to ask you about Lacey Harmon," Linwood said. Fallon blinked slowly. "I haven't heard that name in years." "We found your voice on an anonymous call," Linwood said. "You suggested we look at the psychology department." "Why?" Fallon's eyes shifted. "That was a long time ago. I don't remember the details. You recommended Craig Durnell for a leadership fellowship. He was a promising student. Was he also a killer?" Fallon's mouth tightened. "Detective, I'm not under arrest. Unless you have something more than tone of voice, I suggest you leave." Megan stepped forward. "You saw what he was, and you protected him." Fallon didn't answer, but Linwood saw it, the flicker of guilt. "We're not done," he said as they turned to go. Back in the car, Megan whispered, "He knew. He helped hide it." "Then we find how—" Fallon's silence gnawed at Megan. "If he had helped Craig and Raskin conceal Lacey's death or worse, orchestrated any part of it, then the web went deeper than anyone had realized. And while there might never be direct proof he laid hands on Lacey, Megan believed the truth was encoded in patterns, records, whispers buried in files long forgotten. Detective Linwood assigned a junior analyst to comb through archival emails and campus correspondence from the early 2000s, especially anything sent by or to Professor Fallon. It was tedious work, and most faculty communications from that era were stored on outdated backup drives that needed manual parsing. Megan, meanwhile, started digging into the files of the other girl Lacey had mentioned, Renee Carson. What she found chilled her. Renee had reported an incident involving inappropriate comments from a faculty member in her spring semester. The form didn't list a name, but it was submitted to the student counseling office. It had been marked Resolved Student Withdrawal and filed away. The counselor assigned to Renee's case, Dr. Marlene Yates, still living in Ridgewater, still working part-time at a local community clinic. Megan and Linwood paid her a visit. Yates opened the door with a cautious smile. "Can I help you?" "We're here about Renee Carson," Linwood said gently. Dr. Yates's eyes dimmed. That poor girl. Megan stepped forward. "Did she name the professor?" Yates hesitated. "She was scared. Said he had influence. That he could ruin her reputation. I pushed her to report it formally, but she withdrew before we could take next steps." "Was it Fallon?" Yates looked away. "I can't say for certain, but that's who she was assigned to for her psychology seminar." That was enough. Back at the station, the analyst returned with a hit. One email dated April 8, 2002 from Fallon to a university administrator. "Per our conversation, I strongly advise approving Mr. Durnell's request for after-hours building access. He's working on a sensitive project related to student leadership psychology and needs flexibility. I will vouch for him personally. The building fine arts, the same place Lacey had been lured to. The napkin message, the blackout zone, the hidden tape, everything pointed to that location. Fallon had cleared the way, not with force, but permission, influence. Megan stared at the screen. He didn't kill her, but he helped them plan it. Maybe even gave them the idea. Linwood nodded grimly, and he made sure no one asked questions. They couldn't charge Fallon with murder. But obstruction, aiding, and abetting misconduct, those were still options. Especially with Raskin's cooperation. The DA moved quickly. Fallon was arrested 2 days later. News broke almost instantly. Retired Ridgewater professor arrested in cold case conspiracy. Students came forward with stories of unease, odd encounters, late-night meetings they'd dismissed as part of the college experience. One even remembered seeing Fallon and Craig arguing behind the library steps the day after Lacey disappeared. Something about cleanup, the witness recalled. Craig looked pale. Fallon was furious. It all began to coalesce. The real story wasn't just about a jealous boyfriend or a scared accomplice. It was about a culture of protection, of power shielding power, and a girl who tried to shine a light on it. After Fallon's arraignment, Megan sat outside the courthouse with Linwood. She was so smart, she said quietly. She saw it coming. She laid breadcrumbs. It took 20 years, but we followed them. You're the reason we got here, Linwood said. You never gave up. I did, Megan whispered. For a while. I let the silence win. Linwood looked at her. Then you came back. That's what counts. She nodded. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of spring rain. Somewhere inside her, Megan felt Lacey smiling. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, former Ridgewater students, victims' advocates, even quiet, gray-faced parents who had likely come with their own buried grief all gathered to watch Craig Durnell's trial unfold. It was the most public moment the small town had seen in decades. The community that once celebrated Craig's charisma as student council president now whispered behind their hands as damning testimony emerged. Megan sat in the third row, a few seats behind the prosecution table. She wore a simple black blouse and jeans. No makeup, no pretenses. Only the sharp clarity of purpose in her eyes. The prosecution opened with Lacey's diary, then the cassette tape. The court fell silent as Lacey's voice filled the room. If you're listening to this, then something happened to me. Some jurors looked down. Others stared at Craig. He never flinched. But Megan saw it, the slight twitch in his jaw, the sweat gathering at his collar, the absence of his once unshakable grin. When Howard Raskin took the stand, it was clear he had no love left for his former co-conspirator. Craig said she'd talked too much, he muttered. He said we had to handle it. He called Fallon after. I didn't know they were that close. The room shifted. The jury scribbled notes. Megan's throat tightened. The prosecution introduced the physical evidence, the cardigan, the sandal, the napkin. Forensic links to Raskin digital fingerprints of Fallon's cover-up access records. The prop room. The emails. The missing girl, now no longer missing her body, identified, her final days reconstructed. Craig's defense team floundered. They tried to paint the case as circumstantial. A theory built on old paper and faded memory. But Lacey's words were too powerful. Then Megan took the stand. She was the final witness. I didn't know she was afraid, Megan said softly. Not at first. She smiled through everything. But she left me a map. A way to find her. Why do you think she trusted you with that? The prosecutor asked. Because she knew I'd come back, Megan said. Even if it took 20 years. And she had. That night, Megan sat by the lake where Lacey's vigil had been held months earlier. The wind was cold. A few candles, wax-warped and forgotten, still sat at the water's edge. She closed her eyes and remembered the last night they'd spent together before the party. They'd walked along this shoreline laughing about nothing. Lacey had found a pebble shaped like a heart. She'd handed it to Megan and said, "For when I'm not around to remind you what love feels like." Megan had kept that pebble in a drawer all these years. She pulled it out now and dropped it gently into the lake. A week later, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts. Craig Durnell was sentenced to life in prison. Howard Raskin received 12 years for his role as an accessory with parole eligibility after 8. Professor Fallon's charges, while less severe, stripped him of his pension, his titles, and what little respect he had left. He would serve 5 years under federal investigation for obstruction and conspiracy. But none of it would bring Lacey back. What it did, Megan believed, was set her free and shine a light on every other dark corner still hiding the truth. 2 months after the trial, Megan returned to Ridgewater's campus, not as a student, but as a guest speaker. She stood behind a wooden podium in the same lecture hall where Lacey had taken her freshman orientation class. A banner stretched across the back wall, Campus Safety Awareness Week, never forgotten. The audience was mostly students, some faculty, some staff, a few journalists. But what struck Megan most were the parents. Parents of girls who had gone missing in other states. Parents who had buried daughters too young. Parents who still waited for answers. "I'm not a detective," Megan began. "I'm not a lawyer or a journalist. I'm just someone who lost her best friend and refused to let the silence win." She told them about the diary, the napkin, the tape, the prop room, the years of unanswered questions. "I was afraid for a long time," she admitted, "afraid to remember her." Because remembering meant facing the guilt of leaving Ridgewater, of not digging sooner. A hush swept the room. But Lacey never stopped trying. She left traces, notes, messages, and eventually she led us to the truth. Megan paused and looked out across the rows of faces. "There are people here tonight who've lost someone. Maybe you're still waiting. Maybe the world moved on without giving you answers. Don't stop looking, don't stop asking, because even after 20 years, the truth can still be found." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Not loud, not theatrical, just steady, grateful. After the event, Linwood met Megan in the back hallway. "She would have been proud of you," he said. "She saved herself," Megan replied. "I just followed the trail she left." They stepped outside into the cool evening. Across the quad, a newly installed bronze plaque glinted in the lamplight. It read, "In memory of Lacey Harmon, 1982-2002. Her voice echoed longer than her silence ever could. Megan walked up to it and traced the letters with her fingertips. A single white daisy lay at the base. She didn't know who had left it, but she smiled,